Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel on Mir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Nun Dalid Amid Aleph. Right? Nun Dalid Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today 2 lines off the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch on Nun Gimel Amid Beis, Siman Reish Ayin Dalid Sif Beis. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hadisunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Alehem V'Yitziam Mitzara L'Rvacha Me'afelo La'oira Mishiba L'Geula, Hashta Bagalo V'Zman Kariv and Armein. Our learning should be a schus for Fuah Shalema for Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam, and our learning should be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbe Shem should watch over them, together with all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol makom shehem. Says the Mechaber, Siman Reish Ayin Dalid Sif Beis. We're discussing the halachas of Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, Mitzvah livtzaya b'Shabbos prusa gedola. There's a mitzvah that when you cut the lechem mishnah, when you cut the challah on Shabbos, you should cut for yourself a nice big chunk of challah. How big? Shetaspik loy lechol hasuda. You should cut a piece of challah that's going to be enough challah for you for the whole suda. So don't just cut a little slice, and then when you want more challah during the suda, reach out to the challah plate and take more challah. Cut yourself a hunk of challah that's going to be enough challah for you for the entire suda. Says the Ramah, V'ayin le'el siman kuf samach zayin sif aleph. We'll reference that now in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, ois katan vav. Prusa gedola. You should cut for yourself a very large piece. Now, the Chavetz Chaim brings up, normally, we don't like that idea. As a matter of fact, during the week, we say that you should not cut a prusa gedola. Why? Because when you cut a prusa gedola, you look like a Rav's son. What's a Rav's son? A Rav's son is a glutton. You look like you're chopping a big hunk of challah over there to go, chow down on a super big meal. You look like a glutton. You're not supposed to make yourself look like a glutton. That's not miderech hanova. That's not atznei aleches and Hashem alikecha. So, how about on Shabbos? On Shabbos, there's no problem. Says the Chavetz Chaim is cut vav v'loy mechsi karavsan. On Shabbos, when you cut yourself a big hunk of challah, no one's going to think it's because you're a glutton. Why? Because you never do this. You never do this. That's not the kind of person you are. Nobody ever sees you do that. You know why? Because you're not supposed to do that during the week. Vadai kavanasai shechav v'lav mitzvah. So why is he doing it on Shabbos? Guy never does this. Why is he doing it on Shabbos? Oh, because it's Shabbos. And the chavivus of Shabbos and the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos and Seudas Shabbos, v'roitz alech al harbe, l'chvoid Shabbos and l'chvoid Suda Shabbos, you want it to be a Suda baravchus. You want to have plenty. So you're cutting yourself a big hunk of challah. That is covered Shabbos. Okay. Says, by the way, the reason the Ramah says over here, Ayin le'el kos samach zayin sef aleph, is because it's back in Hilchos P'tzias Apas in Siman Kuf Samach Zayin, where we discussed the fact that during the week, you're not supposed to do this. Moving on to Sif Gimel, bottom line near the end of the line, says the Mechaber. And this again is a halacha that we've referenced to earlier, Be'inyan, the Yayin of Kiddush. Says the Mechaber over here by Chala, Ein ha-mesubin rashoim litoim ad sheyitoim ha-boitzeah. So the one who's making hamoitzi, he makes hamoitzi, he starts cutting the challah, he might already be giving out challah. He might be passing around pieces of challah already. Says the Mechaber, no one's allowed to eat from the challah. That's not proper. They don't have reshus to eat from the challah, ad sheyitoim ha-boitzeah, until the one that made the bracha eats. He has to eat first, then other people could eat. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Gimel on the bottom line of the Gimel Amid Beis. Hainu afal pisha nasan habaytzeya lifnei kol echad ve'echad es chelkai. Even if the baytzeya, even if the one who made a moitzi already passed out the portions of challah to everybody sitting around the table, they still should not eat until the baytzeya eats. And the Mishnah Berurah says, v'chanal, like we've seen earlier, b'siman kuf samach zayin sif tesvav ayin sham. It's not bakovedik. The reason it's not bakovedik is because all of the people that are sitting around the table are coming on to the baitzeya. The baitzeya is the one who made the hamoitzi. he was mitzi them in the bracha. He's the one that has the lechem mishnah, and he's the one who's passing out pieces from his lechem mishnah. So you need him. You need him to give you lechem mishnah, but you're going to start eating before he gets a chance to start eating because he's busy cutting the challah and passing around the pieces. That's not bakavadik to the beitzeiah, and therefore you have to wait until the beitzeiah eats. Now, against that backdrop, the Mechaber gives us a caveat to this halacha on the top line of Nun Dalet Amid Aleph. However, v'im yesh lifnei kol echad lechem mishnah, let's say everybody sitting around the table has their own lechem mishnah. Now, they might not be making their own hamoitzi. Maybe the beitzeiah is making hamoitzi, and he's being moitzi them in the bracha of hamoitzi, but they have their own lechem mishnah. Now, if they have their own lechem mishnah, they don't really have to come on to the beitzeiah. They don't need a piece of challah from the beitzeiah. If they don't have lechem mishnah, so then they have to wait for the beitzeiah to give them a piece of lechem mishnah, because everybody sitting around the table is supposed to eat from the lechem mishnah. But if they have their own lechem mishnah, so they're being yoitza with their own lechem mishnah. Even if they're being yoitza the bracha of hamoitzi from the beitzeiah, but they don't need challah for the beitzeiah. So therefore, says the Mechaber, im yesh lifnei kalechad lechem mishnah, if each person has their own lechem mishnah, then yichaylim litoim, then they could already start eating from the lechem that's in front of them, afa pisha adayin lo tamhu, even though the beitzeiah has not yet begun to eat. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Ches, lechem mishnah. If they each have their own lechem mishnah, Ritzayna Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, va'oz, in that case, that they have their own lechem mishnah, afal pishu moitziam b'berchasai, even if the beitzeiah is being moitzi the mesubin in the bracha of hamoitzi, still yechaylim litam kaidem loy. They're still allowed to eat before he begins to eat. Avalim ein liftei kalechad lechem mishnah. But if the people sitting around the table do not have their own lechem mishnah, even though they have challah for their meal in front of them, maybe each one has a bilkala in front of them, right? You go to, let's say, a Shabbos Sheva brachas. So they set the table very beautifully, and they put a bilkala in front of everybody. But only the beitzeiah has lechem mishnah. So in that case, really, every person sitting around the table has their own challah for the Suda, but they still have to come on to the beitzeiah because they don't have lechem mishnah. So they need a piece of his lechem mishnah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval im ein lifnei kol echad lechem mishnah. If each person does not have their own lechem mishnah, afal pi shekol echad ki kari sheyochel mimenu lefanav, even if they have a bilkala that they're going to be eating for the Suda, that's going to be their ikar challah for the Suda. Still, kulam tzvichim lismay challah beitzeiah. They still all need the beitzeiah sheyesh lefanav lechem mishnah, because he's the one who has lechem mishnah, and the halacha is that they need to eat a piece of the lechem mishnah. So they have to come on to him. They have to wait for him to cut the challah and give them a piece. Once they have to come on to the beitzeiah, it's not proper for them to begin eating before the beitzeiah. And therefore, ve'enam rasham litam kaidem loy, they have no right to go start eating food before he does. Moving on to the final sif and siman reish ayin dalet sif dalet. Says the Mechaber, Suda zu, this Suda, the Friday night Suda, Vishal Shachris, and the Suda of Shabbos day in the morning, E efshar la'asoisam b'loy pas. You cannot make Suda Shabbos without pas. Suda's Shabbos, the Friday night Suda, and the Shabbos day Suda specifically, those two Su'udais require pas. It's a halachic requirement. Says the Mishnah Berurah test, Suda zu, Ritzayna Lemar. What the Mechaber is trying to tell you over here is as follows. Even according to those shitas in Siman Reish Tzadik Aleph Sif Hey, who are makel when it comes to Shalshudis, right? I love that word. Shaloshudis means nothing. Shalosh Su'udais. Shaloshudis is some kind of a weird corruption. I don't know where it came from. But even those that are makel, when it comes to Su'udas Shlishis, and they hold she'ein tzarich la'asaysa dafka b'pas, and they hold that Suda Shlishis doesn't strictly require pas. There are those shittas that say that you could be Yotze Suda Shlishis with Paris. So even according to those shittas that you don't require pas for Suda Shlishis, be'elu shtei Seudais, by these two first Seudais of Shabbos, the Friday night Suda and the Shabbos morning Suda, moidu kulei alma, everybody agrees that you must have pas, teheim ikar kvaid HaShabbos. Because the night Suda and the day Suda, the morning Suda, those are the Iker covered Shabbos, those definitely require pas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if somebody has some kind of an oinus, some kind of an unforeseen circumstances, that prevents them from making a proper Friday night meal. I don't know, there was a medical emergency, or somebody was ill, or whatever it is, and they're unable to make a proper Friday night Suda. Yidcha Suda ad lamachar, they should postpone that Suda until the next day, until Shabbos day, sheyoichal sholosh Seudais bayoim, and they should see to it to eat 3 Seudais by day, so that they should be Mekayim, having 3 Sudas on Shabbos. Now this gets very interesting, because the Mishnah Berurah says, Ubelvad. However, there's a caveat here. Ubelvad sheyekadesh balayla, but you still have to make Kiddush. Kiddush, we said, comes from Zachar es Yom HaShabbos l'Kadshay, Zachreu alayayin. That, we said, is very possibly a Daraisa, Chiv Daraisa of Kiddush Friday night. So, while I'm telling you, the Chavetz Chaim says, that if you weren't able to make a proper Suda Friday night, you should postpone it to Shabbos day, and you should see to it to eat 3 Sudas Shabbos day, but that doesn't help you for Kiddush. You gotta make Kiddush. Now, realize, once you have to make Kiddush, what are one of the halachic requirements of Kiddush? And Kiddush ela b'makom Suda. So once you make a Kiddush, you have to have a Suda. But that brings us to another halacha that we learned. What qualifies as a Suda in the context of Ein Kiddush ela b'makom Suda? In the context of Ein Kiddush ela b'makom Suda, you could get away with very little. You could wash and you could eat a kazayas of pas. You could wash and you could eat a kazayas of mizonos. You could eat a kazayas of cake. So you could have a kazayas of babka, and you could be Yotze Suda, Kiddush b'makom Suda. You could drink 2 revius in Avyayin, 1 revius for Kiddush and 1 revius for Suda, and you're Yotze Kiddush b'makom Suda. So to be Yotze Kiddush and Kiddush b'makom Suda, you need very little. But that's not really a Suda, right? We're calling it a Suda in the context of Ein Kiddush ela b'makom Suda. But is that a proper Suda l'chvayt Shabbos? Is that a proper Suda Shabbos? No, it's not. So says the Chavetz Chaim, yes, if you're unable to make a proper Suda because of an oinus on Friday night, you could push off the Suda till Shabbos by day and eat an extra Suda Shabbos by day and make sure you eat 3 Sudas by day. But that doesn't pater you from Kiddush. So you'll have to make Kiddush, and you'll have to meet the minimum requirements of Ein Kiddush ela b'makom Suda. Says the Mishnah Berurah inside. Im yesh oinus she'eina yachal lekayim Sudas arvis, Yidcha Suda ad lamachar, postpone the Suda until Shabbos day. Sheyoichal shalosh Sudas b'yom, see to it that you eat 3 Sudas l'chvayt Shabbos day. Ubelvad sheyekadesh balayla, but you have to make sure to make Kiddush Friday night. V'yoichal miyad achar Kiddush kazayas mechabesh asaminim, and make sure to eat at least a kazayas of cake. Oisha yishta revius yayin, or at least drink a revius yayin for Suda. Earlier we said that means you need a revius of yayin from the kais of Kiddush and another revius for the Suda. K'moshe kasav b'simin reish ayin gimel sif hey. That concludes simin reish ayin dalid. Moving along to simin ayin reish hey. Technically simin reish ayin hey, but obviously reish ayin hey would spell ra'ah, which is bad, and la'olam, a person should always use a lashon nikia, and we want to steer away from using the word ra'ah, so we refer to it as siman ayin reish hey. Devarim ha'asurim lasais la'or haner b'Shabbos, the things that it is forbidden to do, acts that are forbidden to perform by the light of the Or HaNer, by the light of the Neros of Shabbos, Ubo Yud Beis Seifim, and here we have 12 Seifim. So let's remember, on Chanukah we have a halacha that you're not allowed to be mishtamish l'Or HaNer. You're not allowed to use the Neros of Chanukah for any other purpose. You're not allowed to read by Neros Chanukah, also lehishtamish b'hem. Why is that? The reason is because the whole purpose of Ner Shel Chanukah is Persume Nisa. We want to publicize the Nes of Chanukah. Now, if we're going to use the Neros of Shabbos, then no one's going to look and say that these Neros are for Persume Nisa of a Nes. They're going to look at it, they're going to say he has a Ner, so he can read a book. So in order to make sure that people realize that these Neros of Chanukah are there for the mitzvah of Neros Chanukah, and they're there for Persume Nisa, we have an Isser that you're not allowed to use the light of the Neros Shel Chanukah. There is no such halacha by Neros Shel Shabbos. There's no halacha by Neros Shel Shabbos, now you're not allowed to use them. But there is another problem, and that is that we don't want you to use the light of the Neros Shabbos because we're afraid that you're going to be doing something that requires concentration, right? So let's say one of the examples we're going to see now is you're learning the daf, or you're learning your Dirshu, Mishnah Berurah, and you're going through a very complex biur halacha. So you're concentrating, and if you do it la'ara ner, if you do it by the neros of Shabbos and you're concentrating, you're going to lose track. You're going to forget that it's Shabbos. Then you're trying to read something and it's a little too dark, so you might be mat to the ner. You might go manipulate the wick. And by manipulating the wick, you might be over on the Isser Havara Daraisa. You might cause the flame to grow, and now you're over Malacha Daraisa on Shabbos. And therefore, Chazal outlawed, Chazal assered, doing things that require concentration, la'ar haner of the Ner Shel Shabbos. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Ein Poilin. You're not allowed to delouse a garment, to remove lice off of a garment. Tremendous chesed that the Rebbeinu Shalom does for us nowadays, that people read this, and Baruch Hashem, more or less, they don't even know from it. Delouse a beged? What, lice? Who deals with lice? Baruch Hashem. But back in the day, this was a very, 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 very common problem, and a very annoying problem, and a very aggravating problem. When you learn something like this, you have to have akaras hatoiv to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Baruch Hashem, that we don't have to deal with it. So the Mechaber says, "Ain't poilin." You're not allowed to delouse a beged. The Ramah interjects, Pirush. What does that mean? Ain't poilin. Leva'er sakina me'abegodim. You're not allowed to remove lice from clothing. Targum bi'arti hakodesh in the Vidoy Maisris. When somebody finishes bringing all of his Maisris in the third year of the Shemitah cycle, he has to say Vidoy Maisris. Part of Vidoy Maisris is he has to say bi'arti hakodesh min abayis. I removed all of the kachim, all of the matanos that I'm mechuyev to give, my Meiser Rishon, my Meiser Sheni, my Trumas, everything that I'm mechuyev to give, I took care of. I did all my Maisris. So that's bi'arti means I removed. So the Ramah points it out. He says Targum bi'arti hakodesh. The Targum Onkelos on the words bi'arti hakodesh is palesi. So you see, palesi means I removed. So ein poilin is to remove lice from a beged. So you're not allowed to do that. La'ar haner, continues the Mechaber, ve'ein kairin b'sefer la'ar haner. You're also not allowed to read from a sefer by the light of the Ner Shel Shabbos. And says the Mechaber, this is true, even if when you're reading, you're just reading in your mind. You're looking at the words, and you're reading them in your mind, but you're not actually verbalizing them. You're still not allowed to do this la'ar haner. Why? Shemayata. Because the concern is that you might come to be mata the ner, you might come to manipulate the lamp or the wick, and you might be over on the Isser Havara on Malacha da Araisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Aleph, Ein Kairin. V'hu adin, same halacha would apply. She'ein boit kenat tzitzis. You're not allowed to check your tzitzis in the morning when you put your tzitzis on Shabbos morning, and you have the neros of Shabbos over there, if they're still burning. You're not allowed to check your tzitzis. What does it mean to check your tzitzis? Pashtus, what this means over here is, we know that there's halacha that the strings of the tzitzis are not supposed to be tangled, right? They're supposed to be loose. So you shouldn't check them to see if they're tangled. As far as the knots and this and that, as we learned at Hilchos Tzitzis, there's a problem of checking them on Shabbos because you might come to make a kesher. You might come to make a kesher shel kayama, which would also be a malacha daraisa. So the Mishnah Berurah says, "V'uadin she'ed beit kenat tzitzis v'chol kai gavna davar atzarich iyun." You're not allowed to do anything that requires concentration. Why? Shemayata ner lahavi Hashem lefi apsila kadei sheyidlak yafeh. Because we're afraid that you might come to manipulate the wick or move the lamp in such a manner that would allow the shemen, the oil, to flow better to the wick, and you will be over on an Isser Da'araisa. Continues the Mechaber on the bottom line here, Nun Dalet Amud Aleph. Umitamzeh, based on this reasoning, Yesh le'asar, it makes sense to aser, afilu hi ba'ashoshis, even if the nair is closed inside a lantern, oy kavua b'chor hakaisel, or it's affixed in a niche up on the wall. Oh, I skipped. I'm sorry. Let's go back. Back to Nun Dalet Amud Aleph in the second line. So we said you're not allowed to do these things. You're not allowed to deal out a beged. You're not allowed to read a sefer. La'araner shemayate. Continues the Mechaber in the second line off the bottom, middle of the line. This is true, says the Mechaber. Va'afilu hi gavoya eser koimos. Even if the nair is located 10 koimos, 10 heights, which I think means 10 heights of a person. So even if the nair is way up there, so it's not, the nair is not located right over here that I'm reading and I could just reach over and be mat to the nair. No, even if the nair is all the way up there, up on a high shelf, I can't be mat it. I can't reach it. Still, the halacha is you're not allowed to read la'ar nair. You're not allowed to dilaus a beged to the or of that nair. Shemayate. What kind of shemayate? I can't reach it. What kind of shemayate? Explains the Mechaber. This is true, even though she'ena yochel ligailov, even though you can't reach it to be mated, you still have this iser. Why, says the Mechaber? Shaloi chilku chachamim bedavar. Because we find over here, and this is based on a Gemara in Shabbos, on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. This is what we call a loy plug. When Chazal made the takana, and Chazal said you're not allowed to do anything that requires concentration by the light of the Ner Shel Shabbos because of a fear, Shemayate, they made that Gzeira flat. They covered all cases. They didn't say, oh, it only applies if you could reach the Ner. No, they made a Gzeira. They said you're not allowed to do anything that requires concentration or an air of the Ner Shel Shabbos. It doesn't matter what the situation is, even if it's way up there in the sky and you can't reach it. Now, on that, says the Mechaber, umitamzeh, based on that rationale of the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Yud Beis, that we're going to aser even if you can't reach the Ner, so umitamzeh, yesh lesar, therefore we're going to forbid you to use the light of the Ner Shel Shabbos, afiluhu ba'ashoshis, even if it's inside a lantern. You might think, well, it's inside the lantern. What, I'm going to go open the lantern and be mat to the Ner? Yeah, it doesn't matter because it's a loy plug. The same way we're geyser even if it's up in the sky, we're also geyser if it's inside a lantern. Or it's a lamp that is fixed in place. It's a sconce that is affixed to the wall. So you're going to say, what, I'm not going to be mate. It's attached to the wall. Doesn't matter. Still, it's a loy plug. They made this gzeira on all of the Neres Shel Shabbos. V'chein b'ner shel shava, and this is also true by a wax candle. Now, the case of the wax candle we're going to leave till tomorrow, but let's see the Mishnah Berurah that we have until now. Turning back to Nun Dalet Amud Aleph, Mishnah Berurah is cut and base. Ba'ashoshes. So the Mechaber said, once we see from the Gemara in Shabbos that there's a loy plug on this gzeira, and the gzeira applies even when the nair is way up high where I can't reach it because of a loy plug. So it also applies to a nair that is closed inside a lantern. Says the Mishnah Berurah, how about v'mi segura b'mafteach? Let's say we have a very fancy lantern, and the door to the lantern has a lock. Oh, now, in order to be mat to the nair, you would have to get the key, open the lock, and then reach inside and be mat to the nair. Is that different? Or do we still say loy plug? Says the Mishnah Berurah, if it's locked with a key, yesh matirin, then there are those that say it's a mutter to read. In the Sharitziyah, he sends us to the Bach, to the Magen Avram, the El Yerabah. If the nair is locked inside a lantern, then there are those that are matir to read by the Araner, or to be dilaus a beged la'araner, or to do other things that require concentration by the light of this nair. Why? Why don't we say loy plug? Loy plug. The Chazal made gzeira. It applies to all cases. So the answer is, the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain, that the matirim make an interesting difference between this case and the case of the Ner that's way up high that you can't reach. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, turning to Nun Daled Amud Beis. The taimam, the rationale of the matirim is, the dafka kishegavoya haner esru koimos asru. When did Chazal say that their gezerah remains in place because of a loy plug, even though the tam doesn't seem to apply? In the case by eser koimos, in the case where the ner is located up high, then they say that the gezerah remains in place. Why? Mishum de darkoi kein lipa'amim kedei sha'al yedei zeh yireh mashe begavoya. A lamp that's placed way up high is not unusual. Sometimes you take a lamp and you put it way up high so that it should cast its light over a wide area. When you have a lamp that's low down on the table, the light only goes right in its local area. But if you take a lamp and you put it up high on top of a piece of furniture, now the light gets cast in the whole room. So the case of a lamp being placed up high is not an unusual case. So what? The logic is like this. There's no intrinsic shinui. There's no intrinsic hecker in the case of a lamp up high. There's nothing unusual about having a lamp up high that will make you stop and say, oh, don't be mate the ner. A high lamp is a normal thing. So if you're reading by the light of a high lamp and it's too dim, yeah, you might take a step stool, climb up, and be mate the ner. There's nothing unusual, intrinsic in that ner that's going to make you stop and say, oh, wait, I can't do it because it's Shabbos. Contrast that to the case of the locked lantern. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ma she'ein kein lahaskir to lock a lantern? She'ein darkei klal. The Chavetz Chaim says that was completely unusual. Nobody locked a ner inside a lantern. Now some of you are sitting there, well, maybe they did it because they want to make it kid-proof. Rabbi Say, we don't know from lanterns. We don't know what it means to have your house lit by flames, by torches. Chavetz Chaim did. So the Chavetz Chaim is telling you over here, he says, that was completely unusual. It's completely abnormal to have a locked lantern. Shein darker klal, im loy mishum iser Shabbos. So therefore, islay hekera. Now there's a hecker. Somebody comes, he's reading, and then he goes to the lantern and he sees that the lantern is locked. That's mishuna. That's abnormal. So the guy's going to realize, why is the lantern locked? Oh, because it's Shabbos. So there's a hecker that's going to make him stop himself and say, oh, I can't be matir. Islay hekera, v'loy shaykh sheyiftach lahatois. There's no way he's going to come to unlock it and open it and be matir the ner. Dedami l'koyrei perik b'mem adlikin. You know what this is very similar to? This is very similar to what we're going to see Mi'etz Hashem tomorrow in this Siman in Sif Zion, where even though the halacha is you're not allowed to read by the light of the Ner Shel Shabbos, there is something you're allowed to read. You know what you're allowed to read? Perek Bamem Adlikin in Shabbos. The second perek of Masechta Shabbos in Mishnayos, Bamem Adlikin, that talks all about the halachas of Ner Shel Shabbos, that you're allowed to read, Lara Ner. You know why? Because the subject matter that you're reading is going to remind you that you're not allowed to be matir the ner. So too over here, there's an intrinsic hecker in the locked lantern that's going to stop you from being matir the ner. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, while we do have these matirim, there are others who aser reading or doing anything that requires concentration to the light of the Shabbos Neris under any circumstances because of a loy plug. Vayin bel Yerabba, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the El Yerabba Shebetzadid Lahatir, who leans towards being matir, Kishemosar Hamafteach La'adam Acher. If you have a locked lantern, and then you went ahead and you took the key out of your drawer and you gave the key to another person, so now in order to do it, to be matir the ner, it's not just that you have to go get the key. You have to go to somebody and say, can you give me the key to the lantern? What do you need the key to the lantern for? It's Shabbos. Oh, I want to be matir the ner. You can't be matir the ner. It's Shabbos. In that case, the El Yerabba is matir. Because now already you have another person that's going to remind you. And we're going to see in Sif Gimel, also in tomorrow's share, we're going to see in Sif Gimel that if you are, if you want to read La'araner, and what you do is you have another person with you, and you say to that person, listen, I'm going to be reading my Sefer by the Or of the Nair. Do me a favor, watch over me, and just in case, remind me that I can't be mounted in air. So too over here, if you gave the key to somebody else, you have another party who could remind you not to be mounted in air. Also, likrois la'araner b'yoyim b'makom ha'oifel. We're all busy over here with reading by the Araner, and l'chayra we're talking about Friday night. Friday night, you lit the neris, you ate the Suda, you want to chazi your Dirshu Mishnah Berurah after the Suda. It's dark in the house. The only light you have is the Araner. Says the halacha, you're not allowed to read by the Araner. Reminds us, the Mishnah Berurah, that this halacha could be negated during the day too. If it's during the day and you have a room that has a tiny window and there's a corner that's very dark and you still have a nair burning, the Isser applies the same way. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time. Here at Hashem with Mishnah Berurah is Cut and Gimel. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua Sefuras Parnasah Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.